AZ-305, Designing Microsoft Azure Infrastructure Solutions Questions and Answers Set Number 2. You have an Azure subscription. You need to configure an Azure compute solution that meets the following workload requirements. Full control is not required. High-performance computing, HPC, is required. What should you use? Option 1, Azure Batch. Option 2, Azure Functions. Option 3, Azure Container Instances. Option 4, Azure Virtual Machines. Correct answer, Azure Batch. Explanation: Azure Batch is the correct answer as it provides HPC resources without the complexity of full control. Virtual machines require full control and are not related to any workload requirements in the scenario. Azure Functions does not provide HPC, and neither does Azure Container Instances. You are deploying a web app named Web App 1 using Azure pipelines to the following 3 environments. Development, User Acceptance Testing, UAT, Production. You need to ensure that if an issue is identified in production, you can quickly switch back to the previous version of the code. What should you include in the solution? Option 1, DNS Server. Option 2, Azure Front Door. Option 3, Azure Traffic Manager. Option 4, Deployment Slots. Correct answer, Deployment Slots. Explanation: Deployment slots provided by Azure Web Apps is the fastest method for swapping between deployed environments. Front Door is not as fast. Traffic Manager and a DNS server both depend on DNS name caches and TTL values. You have an on-premises Microsoft SQL Server deployment that you plan to migrate to Azure. The SQL Server code regularly executes operating system commands by using the XP_CM shell statement. Performance metrics for the existing system show the following. Average CPU is 45%. Average disk I/O is 98%. Which deployment option should you recommend for the migrated system? Option 1, Azure SQL Database. Option 2, Azure SQL Managed Instance. Option 3, Azure Storage Optimized Virtual Machine. Option 4, Azure Memory Optimized Virtual Machine. Correct answer, Azure Storage Optimized Virtual Machine. Explanation: You need to deploy a virtual machine-based solution for SQL Server as low-level operating system access is required. From the available options, the Storage Optimized Virtual Machine provides the best performance, given the current loadings. You are designing a solution that requires different applications to communicate with other applications by using a polling mechanism. You need to use a fully managed service to handle the messages sent to the applications. What should you include in the solution? Option 1, Apache Kafka on Azure HD Insight. Option 2, Azure Event Grid. Option 3, Azure Event Hubs. Option 4, Azure Service Bus. Correct answer, Azure Service Bus. Explanation: Service Bus uses a publication/subscription method for messages with polling. Event Hubs uses a push mechanism for streaming. Event Grid uses a triggering mechanism for events, push. Kafka on HD Insight is not fully managed. You are designing a large-scale microservices-based application. A message queue will be used to hold unprocessed messages. Each message will be processed once, and then deleted from the queue. Each message will be approximately 32 kilobytes in size. At peak periods, up to 10 million messages might be unprocessed. Which messaging service should you recommend for the application? Option 1, Azure Event Hubs. Option 2, Azure IoT Hub. Option 3, Azure Queue Storage. Option 4, Azure Service Bus. Correct answer, Azure Queue Storage. Explanation: A message queue is needed to meet the processing requirement. The key limitation in this situation is the volume of data. 10,032 kilobytes messages exceeds the 80 gigabytes limit for Service Bus. Your organization manufactures breathing machines to assist patients with asthma. You are creating a Microsoft Power BI dashboard to monitor the overall effectiveness of the machines across all users. Each machine has built-in wireless internet connectivity and can send monitoring data to an online service. Azure Stream Analytics will be used to populate a streaming dataset in Power BI. To which service should the breathing machine send data? Option 1, Azure Cosmos DB. Option 2, Azure Event Hubs. Option 3, Azure SQL Database. Option 4, Azure Stream Analytics. Correct answer, Azure Event Hubs. Explanation: Event Hubs is a good target for large numbers of events from internet-connected devices. It is also a good source of event data for Stream Analytics, which can then be used to populate a streaming dataset in Power BI. You are designing a web app named Web App 1. The headers and footers of the web pages delivered by Web App 1 will contain large amounts of static HTML. You need to recommend a solution to provide the greatest responsiveness for Web App 1. What should you include in the recommendation? Option 1, Azure Cache for Redis. Option 2, Azure Load Balancer. Option 3, Azure Traffic Manager. Option 4, Azure Web App Deployment Slots. Correct answer, Azure Cache for Redis. Explanation: The primary way to improve the responsiveness of Web App 1 is to avoid having it constantly calculating and delivering static content. Azure Cache for Redis is designed to eliminate most of this overhead. Traffic Manager, Deployment Slots, and Azure Load Balancer do not directly address the responsiveness requirement. You are designing a migration solution to move an Oracle WebLogic application from an on-premises data center to Azure. What can you use to host the Oracle WebLogic application in Azure? Option 1, Azure API Management. Option 2, Azure App Service. Option 3, Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS. Option 4, Azure Service Fabric. Correct answer, Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS. Explanation: You can host Oracle WebLogic in AKS, but not in Azure App Service, Azure Service Fabric, or Azure API Management. What are solutions for running Oracle WebLogic Server on Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Virtual Machines, Microsoft Learn? You are planning to migrate your organization to Azure. You are considering the migration effort for each workload based on the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. Which 3 phases should you design as part of the migration plan? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Option 1, Assess. Option 2, Deploy. Option 3, Govern. Option 4, Release. Option 5, Test. Correct answer, Assess, Deploy, Release. Explanation: The 3 migration phases for Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure are Assess, Deploy, and Release. You are planning a migration to Azure by using the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. You consider the implementation of innovative new solutions as critical to the outcome of the migration. Which Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure phase covers the implementation of innovative solutions? Option 1, Adopt. Option 2, Govern. Option 3, Plan. Option 4, Ready. Correct answer, Adopt. Explanation: The Adopt phase is comprised of both the migration and innovation stages.